Good evening to all our attendees. I'm excited to moderate today's panel, which brings together women who are not both state or elected officials, but who are still change makers in their own right. At this point, I am so delighted to introduce each of our panelists. Our first panelist is Mufida Assaf. She is the Associated Student of UCR Student Body President. She is a fourth-year political science and business analytics double major. Throughout her time in student government, she has led many initiatives, including implementing a protocol to report discrimination on campus, anti-discrimination and racial equity training for students and staff, increasing mental health resources, and implementing more programs. She also is a
That's still on there. Do I keep it on? I'm so sorry. Did you get your phone? I did. I wasn't supposed to? No. Okay, I'm so sorry.
And next up is Natalie Ikhrata. Come up wherever you are. Natalie is Master of Finance at the University of Southern California, studying housing and real estate development. But he will speak at the University of co-host of the podcast Urban Planning is Not Boring. Natalie has 5 years of experience working in the public sector and is currently a transportation planner at the LA Metropolitan Transit Authority in downtown LA. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
And then, okay, so born and raised in Southern California, Elizabeth graduated from UCR in 2020 with a major in public policy and a minor in gender and sexuality studies. Throughout college, she is very involved in campus life and clubs and volunteer on and off campus, with a particular focus on reproductive justice work. Since graduating, she has been working full-time with Tesla and sits on the board of directors at Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. She is the author of the Sleep-Deprived Teen, Why Our Teenagers Are So Tired and How Parents Are Supposed to Hold Them Thrive. Described as a call to action by Ariana Huffington and an urgent and timely read by Natalie. The book is an outgrowth of her work with help with his landmark blog on healthy school start times. She is written for the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Atlantic, and others, and has appeared on the State Show and other radio stations. For more info about her, visit www.lisalewis.com and have a table here in the back. Check out her blog. So let's get started with our first question. Change comes in all shapes and sizes. Now, what was the change you made where you saw its impact on others, big or small?
Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So one thing that I did, so I started off in student government as an executive fellow under the Vice President of Finance, and then I was a senator, and then executive vice president, and now I'm the president. One thing that I started as a senator was I implemented a protocol to report discrimination on campus. So I actually worked with the ethnic and gender programs on campus. Whenever I did anything, I tried to collaborate with as many people as possible, just to make sure that I'm, really effectively representing the student voices on campus. So I did that. I worked with the African student programs to implement a Black Studies department in our CHAS college. And then something else that I did was I'm actually currently working on implementing an anti-Blackness and racial equity training for all students and staff. So anyone that goes to UCR has to take that training, kind of a part of what we all have to take when we first get in. So that's one thing. Another thing that I did was I've been expanding the association since I started. So what I did is I implemented a lot of leadership positions, such as implementing an ethnic and gender program liaison under my office when I was the executive vice president. This year, I am creating a vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion to kind of build off on that, and obviously increasing more student involvement. Another thing, I expanded the internship programs that we have under the executive cabinet, and the executive branch, and the Senate. So yeah, those are just some things that I've been working on, as well as implementing some committees that have to do with alumni relations, community service, and student life. We'll pass it on to Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here. I hope you guys are doing really well, and I thank you all for staying so late. So during my attendance at the University of Southern California, I study housing and real estate development there. In my cohort, we are quite large, and I have met many wonderful people from very diverse backgrounds. One of the students that I met there, Samantha Ellman, and I decided to start a podcast because we really wanted to get more people involved in understanding what urban planning is and how it impacts every single person every single day. From the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, a lot of decisions about how you drive, whether you get to your bus stop safely, how much time you spend during traffic hour, how long your commute time is, how far away you live from where you work. All of these decisions are made by planners, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing a lot of information about these very, very important decisions that are being made every single day to everyday people who may not be familiar with urban planning. So we started this podcast, and we were not really expecting much to come of it. We really wanted a platform where we could share our perspectives and talk about the various impacts of urban planning. But the outpouring of support from people all over the world has been nothing short of amazing to me, and has created immense gratitude from my heart because of it. I receive emails almost on a daily basis from people across the country. I've heard from people across the United States. I've heard from people in Switzerland, in Germany, in Italy, students who are undergrad who want to now enter the field of urban planning, join advocacy groups, become political figureheads because of the work that we're doing discussing these various topics. It really keeps me going, and it provides a lot of just immense feelings of gratitude and happiness, and it really keeps me going knowing that there are people that really do love and appreciate my field, because at times, yes, it can be boring, but it's actually nothing short of amazing, and it really does impact every single person in this room, every single person in this state, country, and so we just really wanted to spread that word, and I'm glad we did it.
Okay, yeah, some of you may be familiar, and I know Karen mentioned it earlier, but we, during my time at UCR, we were able to establish the Wellness Express vending machine, and that was one of the highlights of my work at UCR. I noticed there was a gap in access to health and wellness items, and I wanted to see how we can close that gap. So what we were able to do was get a vending machine at the UCR gym that contained a variety of health and wellness items that were not only easily accessible, but also affordable. Most notably was the emergency contraceptive, which was $20. And so I was a part of the Planned Parenthood Generation Action group on campus, and we were able to collaborate with many different on-campus organizations, stakeholders, leaders, to see how we can get that machine on campus physically. So we were able to get into the gym, and we did that, and we saw an immediate impact. Not only in the sales, because obviously we can track it easily through that, but also through social media. We saw a lot of outreach, a lot of support, and so we knew that there was an issue on campus, and we knew that we were addressing it one step at a time. And so that was really great because it was an impact in my direct community, and I was able to directly be involved with my peers. Another really cool thing that we did, or I was a part of in a separate group, was joining the SB24 campaign. And so we did a lot of organizing on campus with meetings, sit-ins, phone banking. We even went up to Sacramento to lobby. And so that was really exciting to be involved in that campaign on the grassroots organizing front, and then have it actually be passed and signed by Newsom. So there's always work to be done, and it can definitely be done in your community.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lewis, and I'm so glad to be here tonight. I am a parenting journalist. I'm also a parent, and I have been immersed in the topic of teen sleep for the last 7 years. So it all dates back to August of 2015, because that was the month that my oldest, my son, was entering high school. And at that point in our local community here in the IE, our local public high school started at 7:30 in the morning, which was incredibly early, and it was the earliest he had ever had to go to school all the way through. So, of course, as a journalist, I put on my journalism hat and started looking into this. Why does school start so early? Because it was glaringly obvious within the first week that it was just not a time that was compatible with his ability to be alert and ready to learn. You know, we were leaving the house every day at 7:10. I was the one driving in there, and all I had to do was look over to see, yeah, he was there. He was really quiet because he was barely awake, and it was hardly a situation where I felt like I was dropping off this kid who was alert and ready for a full day of learning. So I started looking into it, and what I quickly realized was 3 things. The first was that nobody in our community could remember a time when the school had not started at 7:30. I asked around, there were people whose, they were sending their kids there, they had gone to that same high school, they had remembered it, it had always been 7:30 for as long as anyone knew. Second thing though, was I quickly realized this was not unique to our local community. This was the situation in communities and districts around the country. So 7:30 obviously is early, but there are also districts out there starting as early as 7 a.m. And that's first period mandatory attendance. This was not 0 period optional classes. This was be in your chair, and if you are not, you are marked tardy or you are marked truant. So I quickly realized there was this larger issue. But the other piece was that, again, this was 2015, this issue was at that point really hitting a critical mass. So 2014, the previous year, the American Academy of Pediatrics had just released a policy statement. And they recommended that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 because of the impact that these very early start times have on teen sleep and the ramifications when our teens are sleep deprived. So this issue really was starting to hit a critical mass at the time that it really hit my radar, and I started writing about it. So, and again, my background as a writer, that's what I've done my entire career in the corporate world. I have an MFA, I've been a freelance journalist for years. So my first articles on school start times started coming out the spring of my son's freshman year. But then there was an article that I wrote that ran in the Los Angeles Times in September of 2016. So this was my son's sophomore year. It was an op-ed, and it was called Why School Should Start Later in the Day. Now, as a writer, as a journalist, you put your work out there, and that's the best you can do, and then it's out in the world, and you never know what's going to come of it. Well, in this case, that op-ed was read by one of our California state senators, Anthony Portantino, whose district is in Los Angeles. And at that point, he had a freshman of his own. His daughter was just starting high school. And as it turned out, their high school was having conversations about the start time. So this was an issue that resonated with him. He literally read my op-ed in the paper, and he decided he wanted to look into this issue with an eye towards introducing a bill on it. And that is exactly what happened. And I got swept up in this entire journey. I should backtrack and say that as part of information gathering, I had located this resource. It's a group called Start School Later, a national nonprofit. It's been around since 2011. And so I was writing about it. Again, I was writing op-eds, so it was very clear I had a point of view. And I was also starting to advocate locally. So I had started a local chapter of Start School Later. Well, his office, as part of information gathering, also identified Start School Later as a resource. And when his office reached out to them, they looped in all of us who were local chapter leaders in the state. So I was actually involved even before that bill was introduced. So I'll condense because it was a 2.5-year journey. The bill that introduced February 2017, I ended up testifying in Sacramento in front of one of the committees that summer. It was a lengthy process, went through both sides, the Assembly, the Senate, the floor votes, the committees, got to Governor Jerry Brown's desk, and he vetoed the bill. So it had to get reintroduced again. This same number, it was SB 328, had to go through the entire process all over again, both sides. Got to Governor Newsom's desk, and he's the one that signed that into law. So that was signed into law in October of 2019. It had a 3-year implementation window, and that just went into effect July 1st of this year. And it's so significant because we are the only state in the entire country to have a law that sets minimum allowed start times. So that has now gone into effect. And as an outgrowth of my involvement in that, I did end up writing a book, The Sleep-Deprived Teen, and that's the book that is back there. And there's a whole lot more I can tell you about the political process, which was brand new to me, but it was quite a learning experience. I'll just leave it at that.
You as a student also started high school at 7:30 for all 4 years. On behalf of all sweet students, I think. All right. So thank you, everyone. This next question will be about 2 minutes. And this time we'll start from the middle, so we're going to start with Natalie and work our way down. So, was there a particular woman in politics or otherwise who may have inspired you to do what you do?
Thank you. It's a great question, and it was very hard to think of one. But first and foremost, before I answer the question, I do want to say I actually have 2 very inspirational women with me here tonight. And this is why I encourage so many people every day in your lives to go out and really seek union and friendship from people who allow you to wake up every day and just look forward to living out your life. And these 2 women do it for me, so I just want to thank them so much for being here. But in pertaining to this question, one woman in particular has always stood out to me or stood with me in my heart. Dr. Maya Angelou, who is a civil rights activist and poet. I have been reading her poetry and listening to many of her talks, and I did read one of her books in high school. And I think the reason why she resonates with me so much is because I have been very fearful of what the future will hold for me in my career in urban planning, because in my field, we are dealing with the lives of other people, and that's a very huge responsibility to take on, and one that I definitely do not take lightly. And there's a particular quote by Maya Angelou that I would like to read for you guys. It's quite short, but I would like you guys to hear it. So she says, and this is a bit paraphrased, "Some philosophers say that courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage you cannot practice any other virtue consistently. You cannot be consistently fair, kind, true, honest, or generous, none of those things. To be these things consistently, you have to first have courage." When you're working towards something even bigger than yourself, it can be quite terrifying. And I have found oftentimes I feel very terrified about the work that I'm doing, because the decisions that we make in planning does impact people in very tremendous ways. So the communities that I am working for, especially already marginalized communities, deserve someone who is willing to be courageous enough to stand up and fight for them. And I take Maya Angelou's words with me to remind me that before I can do the work that I want to do, I have to first be willing to move past my fears and really start going towards what I hope and dream for my community and for the people that I care most about. Thank you.
Yeah, so this question was tricky for me because every time I thought about one woman, I thought about another one, another one, another one. So I guess my answer would be no. I don't have one particular woman who has inspired me or kept me going, because there's like 3 in this room, 4 or 5 in this room right now that I can name off: Jackie, Denise, Sabrina, my mom, who just started a nonprofit this year. And it's just pretty incredible because I've had the privilege to grow up around a lot of women. Women leaders, and just being involved. So I not only get to like listen and watch them handle life and the many aspects of life and what it means to be a woman, but also as I've gotten older, I've gotten to work with many of them, and that's been really incredible because they all have different backgrounds, lives, occupations, stories, and I can take a little bit from everything or everyone and learn about it. So yeah, I feel like there's too many to name because every day and everything I do, I get to meet somebody new. And I think that's a really cool and great privilege and honor to be able to say that. So.
So I'll keep this answer short because I went over on the last one, I think. The woman that I'm going to name is probably somebody that you guys aren't familiar with. Her name is Tara Zakorn-Snyder. She is the person who started this group, Start School Later, that I mentioned back in 2011, back when her kids were in high school, and she's now a grandma. And that high school started at 717. So she has been at this since that point. And I will tell you, it was not until this fall 2022 that high school finally switched its start time. So there have been many other people involved in this issue. As I mentioned, I happen to sort of be the spark that inadvertently lit, the idea for the bill in California, and then was heavily involved in that. But it was a group effort, and I think so many of the efforts we're talking about here today, activism in general, nobody does it alone.
For me, I think a woman that inspires me, I also had to think about it very hard. I grew up without a mom, so the first person that I thought of was my grandmother. And then I thought of my aunts, both amazing women that were always there for me. My grandma raised me. But I'm going to talk about my aunts. So my dad was very, very strict growing up. He's the reason, I am where I am today. He's the reason why I have the positions that I have and, just everything that I've been doing. But obviously, give me that passion growing up. So I definitely would say my aunt was there for me growing up. She was kind of like a big sister to me. She taught me resilience. I would always go to her if I ever, felt sad about something or conflicted. I'm a very anxious person, so I would always go to her and she'd be like, "You just get over it, whatever's meant to happen will happen." And that mindset, I kind of just adopted it growing up, and it's helped me out a lot. She taught me kindness, care, empathy, not to judge other people, and that kind of inspired me to be that person for others and be a mentor for others. And so, the positions that I hold and I've held, what's been amazing about them is that I've been that person for other people. Everyone that I've hired in my office or the people that I've worked with, I always try to, inspire them and tell them how to go about certain things. I always tell the people that work with me, this isn't just about, you helping me, I also want to help you. I want to see you grow. So yeah, I would owe it all to my aunt for teaching me all these things.
I have one final question, and for this one we'll go in reverse alphabetical order, so we can start with Lisa. So my last question is, what advice would you give to those who want to make change in the lives of others without necessarily being, a policymaker or CEO or anyone in a position of traditional power per se?
So I have several things I would say, so I will probably not say them all. I think probably the most important is being persistent, which obviously is very much in keeping with the theme of tonight. I would say I am quietly persistent. I am not somebody who necessarily is, out usually doing public speaking. My comfort zone is behind my desk. I'm a writer. But being a writer can be very powerful, and knowing that if that's whatever your strength is, that you can lean into that. I think the other thing I would say is be flexible, because you may find that what you are embarking on may change, or it may not look like it's going to work out. I was advocating on the local level, and I have had 2 superintendents in place during the time my kids have been in my local school district. To this day, neither one of them was willing to meet with me. However, there ended up being this additional path that opened up because of my writing and because this bill ended up coming to pass. And I saw that opportunity and I jumped in, and I ended up being swept along for that journey. It ended up with me writing a book. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, great, I'd love to write a book. But I probably would have thought I was going to be writing about something totally different because I didn't know how this was going to evolve. I will also just say the entire last third of my book is all about advocacy, how to get involved. Some of it has to do with getting involved for later school start times, but it also has to do just with advocacy in general. What do you do? What's that first step? How do you kind of, go from sitting there feeling passionate about something to moving forward and, some of the other characteristics that it takes. But I would just leave it with persistency and flexibility, I think will be the two that I'll share tonight.
There's like two aspects that I want to address. The first being like power to the people and power in numbers. You don't have to be one person in a specific position who makes a certain amount of money, who has a lot of funders to make a change. And I think acknowledging the fact that you can do something on a smaller scale is eye-opening. Sometimes, especially as young people, we think we need to do something giant, national, some sort of change, join some sort of presidential campaign to get involved. And that's just not true. It's not the case. I mean, we're all here, all of our testimonies are to show that, right? And so I think it's really important that you start on a small scale level, a local level, whether that be your church, your school, a club, your actual city, your community. That's where you can start, and you can see how your specific passion, whether it be reproductive justice, environmental justice, whatever it may be, later starts, and see how your specific city or club or school, whatever your community is addressing it, and how are they doing it, and how are they not doing it. And that's how you can really start to see where action's needed. And then start building your team. It can just be one person, it could be 10, it could be 50. It doesn't matter. As long as you have that group and that coalition, I think it's really important to not only build, a coalition to support you along the way, but also as like an emotional and mental support, because if you don't know, you'll soon find out that anything political engagement can be draining and a lot of work. And if you don't have those people around you to support you or remind you that what you're doing or why you're doing what you're doing, you may stop. So it's always important to make sure you do build that sort of community in your community, I guess you can say. So yeah, power of numbers, start small, and you can do it. Definitely can do it.
I feel like both of those answers, it's basically everything I wanted to say, so I'm just going to say it a little bit differently. So in urban planning, we often refer to communities as stakeholders, individuals who hold a stake in whatever planning decisions get made. And I think too often we even forget the own power that we hold as individuals in our ability to really change the framework of decisions being made. So what I often tell people, and what I often talk about a lot on the podcast, is how valuable our stakeholders are, and how so often we forget that they are truly experts in their own right as community members. Where you live, where you go to school, where you work, you know more about these places than I myself as an urban planner would ever know. And so I must always take my stakeholders' word over anything else because it's their lived experience. So what I often tell people, and my advice to anybody who does want to make change, is to constantly show up, form collaboratives with people, get in touch with people that share interests, the same passions as you, and really start to organize. And furthermore, not just organize, but show up and show up consistently. Too often, I feel that many people in our generation often feel that they need to go to one meeting and that everything is going to change. They need to write one letter and everything is going to change. You have to be consistent if you want to see change come, because it does not come easily. So don't feel defeated if at the first meeting you attend, you maybe don't get the feedback that you were hoping for. You maybe don't see things changing the way you want them to. Show up consistently, and with that, change will come, I promise you, because it really is always the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, I promise. So show up and show up consistently, and just let your passion drive you, because it really does mean something when somebody understands how passionate you are about wanting to see change in your community. They really do value that. I value that as an urban planner more than anything, and I am a part of future urban planners that feel the same way, and that we really do want to start giving power back to the people rather than taking it away from them. And so I will say, just write many letters, send many emails, make many phone calls, join many organizations, and do what you can. And I really do believe those small steps are going to make a huge impact. Thank you.
Those are really amazing pieces of advice, and we kind of touched on every single thing that I wanted to say. So I'll just add on. I would say one thing is to step out of your comfort zone. Like I said, I'm a very anxious person. I didn't really believe in myself that much before college, but I stepped out of my comfort zone because I had, a mentor that was amazing, and she kind of encouraged me to run for a position, and I didn't feel like I was ready. I did not think that I had what it took to run for Senate, for example, like my first year. But yeah, so you're never ready. You just have to go for it. So I would say definitely just step out of your comfort zone. Be persistent. Don't take anything personally. Everyone has their own opinion. It can change in a second. So even though it might sound personal, it never is. And that's, literally just said what I wanted to say.
So, and thank you to everyone in our panel. It's been such an honor talking to you all and learning about your inspiring stories. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know that I myself have been inspired after hearing from you about all the everyday changes. Thank you again, and I ask our audience to please join me in giving our panelists one final round of applause.